helping us to create this multilingual space. Let us know if you have any issues in the chat, and we're glad to be here. Pass it back to you all.
Gracias a los interpretadores por estar con nosotros. Bienvenidos a todos, todas y todes. Este es nuestro cuarto día.
Welcome to everyone. This is our fourth day of the week against transphobia. And this is also the fourth year of doing this campaign against transphobia. And for us, we're very proud and privileged to be able to come together with these talented voices who are going to tell us their stories today and have been connected with us throughout the entire week. And we're very glad as the Latino Commission on AIDS to be able to organize this week at this very important moment in the year, and particularly today, which is the day where we have to share sad news for our community, trans community in Latin America. This is an important piece of our campaign. If any of our brothers or sisters, siblings from the LGBTQ community have a triumph in any part of the world, it's a triumph for us. But if any of our community has a struggle in any part of the world, it's our struggle too. And so it's very important to have a space in all of these in this week to come out of the United States and talk about Latin America, because many of us come from Latin America and we bring with our activism and our story and our movement the struggles from Latin America. And I dream to be able to reach everything that we struggle for and achieve here in the United States, that we can also bring those successes to Latin America. Some countries have had more successes, and other countries are just beginning their struggle for these rights. And so it's important for us to support in the struggle. And so I'm really glad to be here and share the space with an incredible person, which is our MC, our moderator, who's going to be working today to facilitate the conversation. Patti Betancourt, who's with us today. She's a trans activist born in the city of Guadalajara in Jalisco, Mexico, where the empowerment of the trans community is her main work. And she's been working for over 3 decades in this. Thank you, Patti, for your struggle so that the trans community isn't victim of discrimination and violence. And in 2004, they were able to create the network, the LAC Trans network, and it's to provide political support to respond to the pandemic and taking into account the needs of the trans community, and to move towards a better quality of life and no longer experience discrimination for our sexual orientation and our gender identity. Thank you so much, Patti. Thank you to everyone who's here. Welcome this morning, this afternoon, for those of you all who are joining from other areas. But I just want to say welcome. It's such a pleasure to share this space, share this beautiful, warm space. I feel really glad to be able to share this space with members from different parts of Latin America and who are moving forward in this magnificent struggle that we have. For example, we have a really important person here that I want to recognize their work, Gahela. She's fighting for trans rights in Peru since 2015. And she grew up in a rural area. She comes from a campesina leader, mother, And that's really informed how she struggles, that she understands where we come from and how we struggle. And there's a lot of work being done in Peru. And she's the first trans woman to be in the elections, 2020 elections. We're so glad that you're here. Thank you for being here. Welcome. And of course, Karina, we're so glad Karina's here. As president of an organization in Puerto Rico. You're doing such incredible work there, and we're so glad that you're here. Welcome to this space. We're going to hear about your incredible work. And Anthony, what can I say about Anthony? Well, welcome. Anthony has a degree in justice from the law school in the Inter-American University in Puerto Rico. And it's a person who's really dedicated to the struggle. And so it's an honor to share this afternoon, this session with Anthony also, and with all of the people that will be sharing with this afternoon. So welcome, Anthony. And also Denisse, who is a guerrera woman who has really, who's passed over our borders. I'm so glad that she's here with us, and I'm soon going to be in Mexico to see her in person. My respect for her incredible work. She's organized one of the first uh, trans rights marches in Mexico City. So thank you so much for being here. Welcome to everyone. Now we're going to have a wonderful conversation. I don't think I'm missing anyone, right? So we'll get started. We have a round of questions. I would love to ask a direct question to each one of you. And we'll be saying the questions, and then whoever feels comfortable to respond to the question. The important thing is that you all feel that you're in family, that you're at home, comfortable. And we're just so glad to have your presence here to share with us and the experiences that you've had for the trans rights struggle. So now we're going to get started. Let us know where you come from and the work that you've been doing and how you're fighting for trans rights. I don't know who wants to get started, but where do you come from and what's the work you're doing? Whoever would like to get started can start. Denisse, go ahead. Welcome. Hi, everyone. I am Denisse Valverde. I'm from Mexico City. We've been fighting for 46 years in activism since the first marches. And currently, I'm working with the Red Trans, which is very recognized internationally, Honduras, Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, and Spain. And we are fighting to dignify the respect of all trans women who are living in limbo. And we form a group that's for reparations for trans victims, which has many trans women older than 50 years old. And we're asking for support for medical services and also asking for reparations to dignify trans women. And we're also working in a guide that is for human rights for trans people. And we're also working on a health agenda, healthcare agenda in Mexico. It's very difficult. And many healthcare providers are not aware of support that they need for trans women. It's very hard for trans women to seek healthcare, and the misuse of pronouns when we come to the hospital. And so we're fighting for to educate these institutions so that we have better service for trans women. Because we have to remember that trans women, if there's a clinic that's specialized for trans people, but that's not the case. many of us have to we've we've seen that there has been one really big advance this year, which was the depenalization from 8 to 10 for children 8 to 10 years to be able to start their transitions. But we are fighting for better services for all of us in healthcare. Thank you, Denise. And would someone else would like to share their work and where they come from?
¿Quieren que yo puedo introducir a alguien? Si no es, ok, entonces yo introduzco.
I could start if you'd like. I can introduce someone. Gahela, could you tell us a little bit about where you're from and the work that you're doing? Thank you, Patti. The audio's bad. Thank you, Patti. How are you all doing? My name is Gahela. I'm an Afro-Andina trans woman. I'm the daughter of campesino parents. I am a trans woman with indigenous and Afro-descendant roots, and I am dedicated to agriculture. And I also am dedicated to the fight for trans rights, but especially agricultural workers. Both of my parents were leaders in the agrarian movement, especially my mother, who has fought for the rights of campesino women and men, not only in Peru, but in the at the international level. And my father also has been very dedicated to the defense of labor rights, fighting for democracy during the time of the dictatorship during the Fujimori administration. And so I began working with social civic organizations when I was in school. And that allowed me to get connected once I was in high school. I was able to begin fighting for not only youth, the rights of youth, but also for animals. So I've been fighting for the rights of animals. That's a big love of mine, and also for children's rights and youth rights. But it wasn't until the university that I was able to name who I am. I knew that I was different, but I didn't have the name. I didn't even know that the word trans existed. I learned in my path, and I learned over the time. I learned in the streets. I didn't learn reading. I began to learn from other trans women. And when I began to transition, they threw me out of my home. They threw me out of my jobs. It was really hard for me to continue studying and to continue fighting for for our rights. But I learned something. I got connected to the feminist movement. But I learned that change doesn't just happen. You have to fight for change. And that's the case for all social movements, whether it's labor rights, whether it's education, whether it's health. It's not, these aren't the best places for respect for gender rights. And it was in the university that I began fighting for people from the LGBTQ community. And I started working with Resistencia Trans and other organizations where I got involved. And not only being part of the social movement, but also um, being part of the political movement, feminist, socialist movement. And now, so we founded a political party, and now I'm part of the national direction of the Four Party as part of the elections. And so I don't want to take up too much time, but that's basically where I come from and the my trajectory, where my context comes from. how I'm connected to the earth and my roots, to the anti-extractivist work, the struggle against capitalism, against neoliberalism, and beyond that also that they, on top of all those oppressions, that they also impose a binary um, gender oppression upon us. So I'm really glad to be here, and I think it's so necessary for us to be able to have put these issues on the table and be able to talk about them. Thank you so much. It's so important that we have these spaces in Latin America and that you're doing this incredible work, and that we can share too here with people in the United States and let them know that there are strong activists doing this work in your countries of origin too. So now I will pass the mic to Anthony or Karina. Who would like to talk next about where you come from? Good afternoon. My name is Karina Torres. I'm from Puerto Rico, from Ponce. And in Ponce, I began this struggle for to support our community. I was discovering my own feelings, and it was very confusing to me, everything that was happening. And I founded this project, or we worked in the project AIDS Foundation. That was one of the first places that I began, and I started working as a volunteer, preventing with educational prevention of uh, HIV, and then that helped to take me to the space of really under discovering the world of trans women, and it helped me to discover myself more deeply every day as a trans woman. And so I continue fighting and struggling. I then was part of a group of 5 trans women, and we were fighting for the change to be able to have a name change and uh, the correct gender on our birth certificates and our social security cards. This is a really strong struggle, and we put in a lot of emotional strength because we had to go through a lot of really difficult processes, but we were able to do it with the lawyer from the Commission on Civil Rights, and we were able to succeed in changing um, those that information on our birth certificates and other identifications. And so that helped to open the door for me. I was secretary of another organization, uh, and then that brought me to another organization where I was the treasurer. And from there, I was able to move into the Proyecto Trans Panama, where I was for 5 years working on bigger projects. And that I worked with all of the trans community, including trans men, how to help them to change their names, navigation. We had a support group, a little bit of everything in that project, but unfortunately, after 5 years, it wasn't renewed. The project wasn't renewed, and my contract was renewed. And so from there, I went on to Puerto Rico, and that comes from Los Angeles, California. It's an international organization. And I'm the president also of a project that has just begun that we're supporting. That's called Trancestrales. And we came up with this name for our ancestors, trans ancestors. This is the translation. And so in Puerto Rico, we've been one of the first organizations to really fight for trans rights in Puerto Rico. That's why we decided on that name, ancestors, trans ancestors. And we're also working on another project where I'm the general coordinator of that project was a trans man, but unfortunately we had a really difficult situation with him. It was a suicide. He committed suicide on September 9th. It was a huge loss in the trans men's community. And I didn't want the project to fall apart because he'd done such important work for trans men. And so it's a movement and a contact that brought trans men together, the services that were provided. So we pulled together in a new committee for trans men and trans people because I wanted to make sure that the project continued forward. So very soon you'll be hearing more about this project and also Transestral.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, y ahora para introducir vamos con.
Okay, so thank you. And now we're gonna move on with Anthony. We have 3 more minutes, so you can tell us where you're coming from and about your work. Anthony. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Anthony Falcon, and I live in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I'm part of the community and part of the fight for almost 15 years old. And we have been supporting throughout difficult times. And we have been supporting people going through the same situations. From the things that I've been working on was to be able to get a unisex bathroom in the law school faculty and in different projects as Trans Panama and La Liga Trans, which was a pilot project that helped us to find more people that were part of the community in Puerto Rico, and working with US United and also working with Karina in Euphoria project. Okay, well, thank you. We have learned more of your work and where you all come from. I am very proud to hear about the fight that we all have and the synergy that we have this afternoon. And from my point of view, I just want to tell you a little bit more. In 2004, I go to the United Nations and we were invited for the first time. The population trans was invited for the first time. And we were able to do a lot of work there. And then more work that we did for Latin America was that when everyone in the program in 2008 in Mexico, Jorge Saavedra, and we got to a meeting where Latin America was there, and we were able to get the trans community to be named as such in textbooks, because in Mexico we were called the transvestis, vestidas, and culeras, and travas, and we had names in different countries. So we were able to have this agreement that in whole Latin America we're able to be called the same way in all textbooks, and that was part of the work from myself. And now, knowing you all, I have 3 questions. I'm going to be telling you the questions, you can start digesting them, and I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to leave it out there so any one of you can answer it. The first one is, how did you start in the activism? What motivated you to be in the fight for trans people? And the third one is, what barriers are an obstacle to be able to achieve your goals in the trans agenda? And so the first one, how did you start working in activism? No one? Karina. Well, I started when I was young because I come from a family that mistreated me, and I left my home when I was younger, and I started to get a residency here in Puerto Rico, and it was one of the first ones to get an apartment. And I started the activism there because during that time, there were many people that were rejected by their families, and they were discriminated, and they were kicked out to the streets. They didn't have a place to live, and I had a one-bedroom apartment, and I got 7 people to live there with me that were rejected from their families because they were trans. And from there, my activism started because since I was younger, I went through a lot, and I didn't want other young people to go through that. And that's why my home became a shelter in an urban area. We had rules and norms so we could live together. You had to be studying or working to be able to move forward in life, because it was a small apartment and I couldn't have them for a long time. So the goal was that they had to be studying and working so they could achieve something in life. And that's how I connected with the community and being able to help others and young people in general, because I think that having an opportunity when you're that young lets you to have a good job, a good career, and a good life. And that's how my activism started in San Juan. I kept doing the same work. I kept bringing people to live with me, and I used to help people to move forward. And I think from there, everything that I went through helped me to understand that I didn't want others to go through the same thing. And that's why I started in the fight for our community's rights. Anthony, tell us, how did you start activism? I think that activism reaches to you because sometimes we're in a position where you reach a barrier, and then you understand that you need to find solutions. And it's also interesting to see in the process how it has been evolving as you get older and you start focusing on the fight. And for me, it has been a process of the more tools I have, the better I can do the things that I want to do. And I think it's about doing what you can in the space where you are, in your home, with your family, the family member that is going through the same process, and college and high school. It's just trying to find the same solutions in the space where you're at that will benefit everybody. And sometimes people get complicated when you just need to find equitative solutions for everybody. And throughout this process, you can focus in the areas that work better for you to be able to work on that. So I think that you just need to find what you're good at and do it in the spaces where you're at and start from there. Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to talk about our history and how we started with activism. and why is that we're here. And I'll be asking Denisse now, how did you start with activism? I started by need, because back then everyone that have lived in Mexico knows about the violence that we suffered through the 70s and the 80s. Any police will incarcerate you because you were wearing women's clothes or holding a hand of someone from same sex, and they would cut our hair, they would beat us up. There was a lot of violence against us. I was 16 years old. I lived through the violence because we were raped, beaten up, robbed. Because of all this violence that we went through, we will get together. There is a place called La Alameda next to the Palace of Arts, and there is 20 of us that didn't know back then. I'm telling you, more than 40. This was more than 40 years old, and we used to be called vestidas in Spanish. And back then, we used to get together, share our experiences, and there is no doctor to guide you through your injection sessions, because some people will do it on their own. They will die because an overdose of the hormones. So there is a lot of ignorance, and that's why when we were invited to the Inicio Revolucionaria, they invited us, and we invited everyone else. There's 20 of us. And I think in the first March, we didn't get more than 100 people, but we were scared that we were going to get incarcerated. And we faced that because we were so tired of so much violence that was done against us. There is a lot of violence and discrimination against us, and someone needed to raise their voice. And that's what we were doing. Yeah, thank you. Those experiences are the ones that reflects each of us and how we started our own fight and how we can win our rights. And as you were mentioning, it was really hard in Latin America to be able to express your gender identity, not just how you identify yourself, but also back in our countries, many people went to jail because there was a code by the government that saying that you could be detained. And I remember that. Yeah, thank you for being part of this fight. And now we're going to be asking Gahela, can you tell us what motivated you to fight for trans rights? What motivated you in this fight? I think that many others we live through consequences of transphobia more than the grammar and the academic context. We understand how transphobia impacts our life throughout the most symbolic violence and the more raw violence as homicides. Me in my case, I was in college when I started my transition process. I was also working, getting a salary, and had benefits that would allow me to live comfortably. And I wasn't rich, but I had the income to cover my needs, and I had my parents, so I gave them a little bit, anything that I could, and I had my job. But when I started to transition, I lost absolutely everything. And I knew that was going to happen because I had read that that was going to happen, and I was prepared to face the transition process in that way, but I never imagined that my parents were going to kick me out of our home, that my professors in law school were going to treat me differently when I let my hair grow and I started using lipstick. I didn't think I was going to get fired from one of the most important political studies at work. And I was a homeless for a while. I knocked on restaurant doors, hotels, trying to find a job, and they all will tell me, we'll call you later, or if the job is for you, then no. So that's why I started doing something that I thought it was going to be impossible, because I grew up with an education that criminalizes the right of choosing over your own body. And I said, I'll never work on prostitution. Only lazy people do that, but I had to do it. Life taught me how difficult it is to be a trans person, not just in Peru, but all over the world, but especially in Peru. The situation is very complex because Peru doesn't have any gender law or norms that guarantee the access for trans people. It's actually the absolute opposite. We have an executive branch that is not willing to secure our lives, and that actually will do anything to make us disappear. And because of that, I started doing this to be able to survive.
Y a partir de todo esto, de todo mi proceso de transición, me
So with
tocó
all of that, I had to sleep in the street. And there's a compañera, a friend that opened. I wish someone talked about how a friend opened their doors for them. I wish I had that. I was sleeping in parks. I had to start everything from zero, and I had to confront society, as machista society, transphobic society. And living that in my own skin called me to this work. I never have called myself an activist, but I just simply began to raise my voice so that I could find these changes, fight for these changes, so that the situations of violence and precarity in which we were living, that no other trans person would have to sleep in the street, that they wouldn't have to experience a transphobic discrimination or be raped in your school bathroom. A society in which we could really experience human rights. And so that's how I came into the social movement. And there's a point of reflection in throughout my life. I've always been part of social movements, but at the same time, when I transitioned, they threw me out not only from my home and my school and my job, they threw me out of the social movement. They stopped inviting me to the marches. They stopped inviting me to the political spaces. And that's the context that in which I began to understand feminism. I had never met feminists before. I began to get incorporated into the feminist movement in the street, not at school. And it began my path of questioning what kind of trans person I wanted to be, whether transvestite, trans person, thinking about those terms and that identity. And I probably would have been assassinated like so many other women, especially trans women who are assassinated or we die from different diseases.
Yo agradezco muchísimo al feminismo.
And so I'm so thankful to the feminist movement because that's what has kept me alive and helped me to found the trans movement.
Esto.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And to all the people who are here, be thinking about your questions, because at the end we want to ask the panel if you have any doubts or any questions. We're here to respond to your questions. So now we've heard from would either Anthony or Denise, who would like to talk about what motivated you to join the movement for trans rights? Anthony, Karina, Denise. Yes, I think it was the belief in equity. But beyond that, the studying law. When we study law, we realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, at least in Puerto Rico and the United States. And there's a lot of protected rights that are being attacked by this supreme power, and also in the United States that affects us. It affects us. It limits abortion, limits rights to reproductive rights, sexual rights, and it affects us. Planned Parenthood in the United States helps a lot of trans people, and that affects us also. So the motivation came from the needs of everything that we're missing to be able to have equitable access. And so I had prepared myself to work on these issues and to develop an equitable and just rule of law. And so I think we need to be paying attention to everything that happens, especially when elections are going on. We have to look at how these decisions, the decisions of who we vote for, the politicians, how it's going to affect our rights. Thank you. It's so admirable, everything that you all are talking about. It's not easy, but to have this walking the path of this movement is very difficult. And so I want to then ask Karina or Denise, what barriers have you been up against to be able to carry out your trans rights agenda? You can turn on your mic because we can't hear you. There you go. Oh, there's been so many barriers. I come from an era. I'm 60 years old. I come from a time where they cut our wings for everything. They would run us out of our homes. The only thing that we had was working in sex work to be able to have food. People ask why so many trans women are illiterate. Well, we haven't had the opportunity to be in school. And I'm so glad to hear that there's trans people, trans youth who are now have the opportunity to go to university. We didn't have those opportunities. We were thrown out of the university. And so now I'm dedicating myself to be able to finish elementary school, middle school. I'm still working on that. I couldn't believe when I started, when I met women who were trans women who were 30, 40 years old and they still couldn't read. I couldn't believe it. And that pushed me to continue working with them and to empower them to overcome these barriers. There's barriers, all kinds of barriers in this machista society that doesn't allow us to move forward. We live in a society that only recognizes two genders, and we, with our gender expression, are rejected in every job we apply for. There's a lot of trans women who have degrees, and even with advanced degrees, they're not accepted anywhere. And in 2015, we succeeded that the Mexican government that they would hire 2% trans women, and that has not been followed through on. We have laws that should be protecting us, but they don't follow through on them. But we have to keep making noise so that they listen to us. We have so many needs. Now they say, why don't you save up? Well, how would I save up if I never had a dignified job? So that now at 60 years old, I'd have a pension. That's never been an opportunity for me. I didn't have the same path that most other people had the opportunity to have. We've confronted many things, but we are resilient women. We are hardworking women, and we are continuing to show this, that we will continue forward. We protect our mothers, our grandmothers. We protect our nieces who become our daughters. And so through this path, if you ask me now what obstacles I've had, every type of obstacle. And we've lost jobs. We've had very few successes here in Mexico. And even the successes we've had, they don't even follow through on them. So, for example, we had the success of the law for gender identity in Mexico. That opened a lot of doors, but then they never actually followed through on any of those promises. And so now, as a trans woman, you still have to fight when you go to the bank. You still have to fight when you want to register your cell phone number. You still have to fight everywhere you go because they don't recognize you. You have to continue struggling to be recognized any place you go as your identity. So thank you so much for allowing me to share. Thank you so much to you for sharing these experiences. I think naming them is so important to help us understand why we're here, why we continue fighting. See that we as adults never had the opportunity to assist or attend school. It's unimaginable to live in laws where there's no laws for us. They don't exist for us. And so we want a full citizenship where we can enjoy full civil rights. If anybody else would like to speak, talk about the barriers that you've experienced to carry out your trans rights agenda. Yes, for similar to the compañera in Puerto Rico, we have also experienced a lot of similar discrimination in Puerto Rico against trans women. As the compañero was saying, we haven't had a lot of opportunity for academic preparation, but those of us who, what we have learned, we've learned from the street. I think that's the biggest study that we've all had, is how to survive in the street, how to get food every day. As others have mentioned, many of us are the head of the household, and so we have to figure out ways to provide for our family when we're in this struggle, constantly trying to find a job where we're discriminated against. And the majority of us have to do work that is the majority of people understand as sex work. And for trans women, oh, sorry, many are working in styling, hairstyling, because they think that trans women know about hair. And so that helps us to have some kind of work, but it doesn't give us the opportunity, or we don't have opportunities to be able to change our names. If you look like a woman physically, and then you show your identification to somebody and it says male, that makes things very difficult for people. So I think we still have to keep struggling, educating, and fight for support to be able to get work, education, for it to be recognized that trans communities need more opportunities. If we could have more access to work, that would open a lot of doors for us. So we need to continue fighting. Here in Puerto Rico, we're still criminalized. We're the second or third group most criminalized is the trans community. We have done work with the police agencies, giving them uh, different types of trainings, but they don't administer those trainings. They don't really continue. We continue to see mistreatment on the police and trans women. They make fun of us. They stop us. There's constant traffic stops. We're not able to have a license that has our name. We're made fun of. We're just considered clowns to them. They disrespect us. We just have to keep fighting because these barriers in Puerto Rico are still really strong.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Bueno, ya casi
Thank you so much.
finalizando y me gustaría que la
We're
audiencia
ending, and I'd like to give space for the audience to ask questions. If you have anything you'd like to ask the people here, we're so honored to have all of these panelists who have shared their valuable experiences. And there's two more people to share, Gahela and Anthony, to share a little bit about the barriers that you've experienced as you try to implement your agenda for trans rights. Can you hear me? Yes. So first, I'd like to say to Denisse, I hope that I can live to 60 years. One second, I'm just putting in my mic. So responding to this question about barriers, the strange thing is, Fati, is that when we talk about transphobia or the consequences, the first thing that people do is, oh, you're just victimizing yourself. You're just playing the victim. But no, stop and verbalize the need for public policies. This is not victimization. This is all the opposite. We're demanding our rights. We're demanding equality, equity, and that requires courage and strength. Those of us here, we're not just victims. Sure, fine, we're victims of an unjust system, of course, but we're not just playing out a role of victims. Everything, it's all the opposite. We're overcoming barriers. We are climbing up hills. These violences, these obstacles, these barriers, these impediments that we have to face to be able to get our rights, these are structural oppressions. These acts of transphobia, they're not isolated acts. So what I'm living as a trans woman in Peru, people are also living in Puerto Rico and all parts of the world. This is a structural problem. This is a machista structure, and it's a result of a system, a capitalist, extractivist, and patriarchal system. It's beyond just obstacles that we experience as individuals, and the bullying and the violence, the feminicides that we experience. This is beyond, and even violence that's not as perceived, that is daily imposed upon us. This isn't a natural thing that trans women have to experience. No, this is the result of a process, a daily, continued, permanent process, which is an attack against our bodies. There's a society that operates through machista education, an education that imposes molds of a binary, and that affects our physical, emotional, and mental health. And we don't fit into these beauty molds, the Western beauty ideals. But because of that, then we can't get food, we're unable to get jobs, and all of that represents obstacles from school. I was violated as a, even in elementary school, I didn't understand that what was happening in elementary school, it wasn't just bullying, it was, uh, I didn't understand that I was actually being raped, and because that was because I didn't have any kind of sexual education as a child. I thought I was just being bullied, and these images, um, then this whole thing about pride, they use our agendas just to make money off of our struggles. And aside from the obstacles, I'd like to then also mention some challenges for us. First, we have to question the system, not just the violence that that happened to us and our bodies as trans women. We aren't just trans people. We have other identities too, like age. There's older adults who are trans, and how many of us have access to retirement? We have other identities, ethnic and cultural identities. For me, I'm not just trans, I'm also indigenous. I'm a daughter of campesinos. And so, yes, I'm in the trans movement so that trans indigenous women and trans campesina people are able to live out their full lives. And so I think there's a lot of challenges for us in the struggle to come together and to question the system, because without this, we're not going to be able to. We might think that we're fighting for all trans people, but truly, I think there's a lot more we need to advance in the trans rights movement in these big debates that we have. I think it's important to talk about these things too. But I also think we have to have a holistic perspective, a structural perspective, and understand that we are capable to begin an intersectional process that's not just for some trans people and not just for trans women, but for all trans people, trans masculine people, trans non-binary trans people, for elders, trans elders, for trans people who are dedicated to agriculture, for indigenous, Afro-descendant trans people who are not only experiencing, uh, who are also experiencing racism. We can't talk about transphobia without talking about racism, because they don't just discriminate against me for being trans, they also uh, discriminate against me for being indigenous, for having Afro, being Afro-descendant. And I think it's really important to say all of these things, because then I experience that I'm canceled out of spaces. I come with this discourse and they think that I'm too confrontational, and then I'm not invited back to the spaces. But I think this is really important to bring up, because I think it's very necessary to talk about rights in each country and to respond collectively, bringing up these problems that are affecting our bodies, that are intersectional, and understand all the different identities that we embody as trans people. And so I just wanted to be clear that we have some really big challenges. We have to challenge ourselves to continue bettering the trans.
La charla esta tarde, y nos gustaría que nos hablara de las barreras. Al finalizar,
We're closing up with Anthony. Could you please talk about the barriers? And the audience keep writing their questions, and then the panelists can ask each other if there's anything that they would like to know about each other. So Anthony, tell us about the barriers. Yes, Karina was mentioning the violence in Puerto Rico. It's very intense, and the most vulnerable people are the homeless, people working on the streets at night, and the violence is very strong. It's about killing others. It's about arms, and sometimes it's discriminatory, sometimes by mistake, sometimes on purpose, but unfortunately it's an issue as community and Puerto Rican in general. And as Gahela was saying, it's a systematic issue that many times we can work on. And if we find another barrier, we need to, as Denisse was saying, attack it with education. And I think that education is the key, and there's many ways on how people can learn. And so I think those are some of the barriers that we face. Well, so thank you. It's very emotional to hear about the barriers, and if you become an activism when you need to face some influential public policies, and when governments don't know the needs of trans needs in our community. So we need to keep pushing so we can change the laws, and so things move in our favor. And I think it's very important that we don't give up internationally, so we can keep fighting to be more visible and gain more terrain and a space personally. And I say personally because as winning your own right, you will be winning the rights for everyone else in our community. So we're finalizing now. I don't know if the panel has any questions, and maybe someone from the audience, if they're writing any questions. And then among yourselves, you can ask each other if you have any doubts. Okay, go ahead, Denisse. Well, I just want to say that everybody's saying hi on Facebook. And I have a question for all of you. So thank you for sharing your vulnerability. I send you all my love. And I would like to know about your community. What, Gahela, I was a super fan of your music video, of your campaign in Peru. That's how I found you, and I fell in love with you. So I wanted to learn about your community in Peru. Who's supporting you? And Karina and Anthony, same question, because you live in an island, it's a small place, and the trans community is even smaller. And in Mexico, there's many organizations, Denisse, that are always being created to support our trans community. So I know that none of us are alone. So who is supporting you? Anyone? Well, in Puerto Rico, since it's an island, we don't have a lot of programs that will give services to us. In Puerto Rico, since it's an island, we only have this clinic, and the other one is on the other side of the country. So I think that it needs to be, these clinics need to be expanded in more central places or in the mountains, because those services are not available there. The support that I have right now are very little. There are very little people that I wanted to work with, because not everybody helps you with a good heart. I'm very picky and careful with the people that I share time with and who I work with. And right now, with the last groups that I've been working with in activities to help the community are groups from non-binary groups. And there are many groups of non-binary people that had given me the opportunity to do work with them. And that has opened the doors of my knowledge. I had another, maybe the non-binary person had a different knowledge. And so to work with this population has helped me professionally and to identify other needs that go beyond the person whenever they need some help or service. There's very little people really. And that's why I am a voice that can be heard outside of Puerto Rico. And I'll be here to help whomever wants to come and help in Puerto Rico. We can have a dialogue. There's people that are following me. They know my dedication and love for this because I do things from the heart. And that's why I receive with open arms anyone to implement any of those things and to improve things in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
¿Alguien más?
Anyone else?
Denise.
Denise?
Denise va a hablar, pero prende.
Denise? Well, it's about a speech that I had about balance, and it's very short, and it's called Even Though It Moves. And trans people move the world when we break the attaching structures and when we go against the restrictions that don't allow me to be who I am. We show the world our different feminities. We are all different with our beautiful bodies because we understand the context of our society. And we also wear clothes that don't belong to us. We are forced to leave our homes, our families, to a high-risk world where the first thing we find is the sexual work for fast money. It's not easy. We're kicked out, violated, all that to fight for our rights. The ignorance try to hide and slams our community with sexual disease that affect us. And when we're trying to receive each other, they're trying to make us forget about our beautiful body, neglecting ourselves, and they want us to forget our essence, trying to get little children that are confused. And our family, when they find us, makes us feel guilty. We don't know about what, but we try to hide, and we have a double life to survive during our childhood. Family try to make you live out to the standards of society. We go from lie to lie, creating an imaginary world. Sometimes we don't try to be happy, we just try to survive. Many sisters in the path commit suicide or let others tell them who they are, of fear to face our society. Our path sometimes means a lot of sin and fighting with what has been established in society. Some of us are invisible, facing a society that kills everything that doesn't know. And others are trying to break paradigms that criminalize our identities, and we try to find people that feel like us to find justice. We defend ourselves since childhood, and the war against patriarchy is not a children's play. Some people don't know how much blood has been shed because of our history. We recognize Santa Rivera, Silvia Rivera, who recognize the leadership of all the women that came before us. History is written before us. Some of them want to lead a fight that doesn't belong to them, with trans sisters that understand our same language. And some people try to take advantage of our population. I don't know how to end this text, that I just wanted to talk about our trans greatness. And I will be writing again because I don't want to talk about failure. And sometimes I entertain myself by writing. Women always, always trans, Daniel Valverde.
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
Thank you, thank you.
Aplaudible lo que escuché y me llena
That
de
is a great
todas las personas en el
thing that fills us with love. I don't know if there's any other questions that we may have in the panel. Can I share something? I didn't tell you that I'm running for Congress, and it was a tough time, but also beautiful, because in this run for Congress and to be able to be part of the Congress and represent the trans, indigenous population, LGBTQ, feminists, which we're trying to have a seat in the politics scene in Peru. And even though it has been really hard, the most beautiful thing in the process was to see how lesbian, trans, gays, and the whole diversity of gender got together to build this campaign. And the video, the song for the campaign that alludes to the campaign, is not something that we did for a commercial purpose, but also to show all these people that want to show their own gender identity. And if I can, I just want to show who supports me. And I think those people are the lesbian, trans, marginalized people in this country. And as Denisse was saying, are also breaking stigmas, paradigmas, systems, chauvinism, capitalism, and the patriarchy, because we are understanding that even while there's capitalism, our bodies are not going to be free. And we cannot talk about liberty or talk about community or community with social justice until we break all of that. But we also need to build something and another alternative, because as Denisse was saying, we need to break with this structure. We need to break with criminalism, with the systems, capitalism. We need to break with all those neoliberalism systems that kill us and that are imposed to us in a binary system. We need to break with all of that. But breaking that is the first step. And the second step,
in parallel, is to construct a model and a different economy, an alternative economy that supports life and supports the rights of all people, that doesn't leave anybody outside. And to think about an economy based on and inspired by love, a system that's different from capitalism, different from machismo, a system that's based on social justice, economic justice, gender justice and environmentalism, those are the people who support me. People who have broken down in the system, who have who want really like a dignified life and who want to live in full harmony with the earth and among each other. And I also wanted to connect how HIV, the pandemia, and other diseases are the main cause of death for trans women. When we think about HIV, the first image that comes to mind for people is the image of a trans woman, and that's because of stigmatization. Who believe people who believe that trans we as trans people are more likely to have HIV, but there's no discussion of why we're more likely to have HIV. It has to do with the risk that we have to live in, the way that we're forced um, to put food on the table. And so they're very specific conditions that society constructs, that the system ends up pushing us into a situation where in order to get our bread, our beans, we are only able to support ourselves with health or beauty work or sometimes music, and if not, prostitution. Those are the only things that are open for us. And you all perfectly know that we don't have to talk about books or literature to understand what risks come with that, because no type uh, of protection is enough to really prevent HIV 100%. And so, of course, it increases our risk and we're not able to protect ourselves. And it's not about who we are, it's about what the system imposes on us. It has to do with what the society obligates us to do. And so we have to denounce this. It's all linked together. It's not because of our gender identity, it's because of the conditions of violence that this society, this capitalist system imposes upon us, and the violation or the violence and the situation of risk that it imposes on us. So as long as extractivism continues forward, we can't talk about an intersectional struggle, and especially as long as the patriarchy continues. We have to continue with the feminist struggle, and I send you all a hug. Thank you so much. We're going to close the space. I don't think there's any questions in the chat. I don't know if you have anything else that somebody wants to ask or a question that you want to ask one another, but we're going to begin closing. I thank you all for your time, for sharing with us, between all of us, but also with all the people who are going to see these experiences that you've shared through Facebook and other mediums. So thank you so much. And on part for the part of the foundation I represent, I'm here in Houston, Texas, and I'm just gonna finalize with this video. Go ahead, Hendrik.
Muchas gracias, Gahela, Karina, Anthony, Denisse,
Thank you
a
to
todos.
Gahela, Karina, and to everyone who's been here listening. Thank you all so much. Remember that we have to continue fighting every day to be people, to be visible, to be visible as people with rights. So yes, if you need anything, please let us know. We're here among community. Hugs to everyone. Bye, everyone.
Cuídense mucho.
Take care.
Hasta luego, mis amores.
Chao.
Desde Flash Trans Center, un beso.
Sí,
Bye, mi amor.
bye.